Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. What a qualifying session in Montreal. After weeks of Mercedes saying they're plugging away, they're making progress, they're getting back to the top, George Russell delivers on those expectations, securing pole by the smallest possible margin over Max Verstappen today. Big question as to why Lewis Hamilton keeps falling away from Russell in these qualifying sessions. Toto Wolff has a few things to say on that, but both Ferraris out in Q2, Sergio Perez out in Q1. So many storylines today. Very much on Twitter, your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new. As always, I would greatly appreciate it. What a day we had, including lots of rumours on the driver market. Some rumours, some confirmations. Yuki Tsunoda has extended his deal with RB in 2025. He's going to keep getting, it seems, these one-year extensions. I wish, and I've said this multiple times, that he got the drive at Red Bull. They've not decided to do so. They've re-signed Sergio Perez. We'll get into that in a couple of minutes' time. But Tsunoda's going to say, I think this makes sense. Realistically speaking, there are no better options. RB are a good team, right? They've made serious progress. Their car is much closer now to the Red Bull than it was over the last couple of years. They've made moves. Yuki is looking at Haas. Yuki's looking at, Alpine. And he's thinking, why would I leave? Sure, the Red Bull drive feels off the table, but who knows, right? If Perez keeps performing like this, who knows what's up in the air. Contracts are one thing, but, if you're out in Q1 every weekend, then contracts only take you so far. So maybe there's still something in this for Yuki, or potentially the Aston Martin Honda thing over the next couple of years. I still think is a realistic option, but I think this makes sense to both parties. Daily Mail as well are reporting that Ollie Behrman has, signed the deal with Haas. This is a done deal. I think this is effectively a done deal. Whether it's actually signed, I don't know. But there have been multiple sources over the last few weeks telling me and others that, this is basically happening. Behrman will join Haas. It's only a matter of time until this gets confirmed. I've also got to wonder whether a Carlos Sainz move could already be a done deal as well, just because Sainz will, I imagine, wait for the Spanish Grand Prix in the next race to confirm whatever he's up to, and we may have some idea what that is. But Behrman to Haas seems basically an inevitability at this point. Of course, he had the outing replacing Carlos Sainz way back in Saudi Arabia. But although Daily Mail are reporting that it's a done deal, it's not yet been, of course, officially confirmed. Helmut Marko actually said on Ricciardo, Racing Bulls is still a junior team, so you have to think about what will happen in the future in terms of Ricciardo not performing. I think he also said that he's basically had one good race this season or something like that. Anyway, it's interesting that Jacques Villeneuve was absolutely, crucifying Ricciardo yesterday. Marko comes in on him today, and then Ricciardo delivers an absolutely barnstorming performance in qualifying. So what a day for him. This is the way that it looks right now in terms of the driver lineups for next season. Alpine is far from confirmed. We're obviously assuming that Gasly is going to stay there. We're almost certain now that it's going to be Antonelli in that Mercedes alongside Russell, Alonso and Stroll, obviously, let's be real. And then Albon, we think maybe, and Sainz. Behrman, we think is going to be here. Ricciardo is probably going to be here. Time will tell on the rest. But actually, Carlos Sainz has been told by Toto Wolff, you ain't coming to Mercedes. Not like they wouldn't necessarily want him, but it's more like they want to take a different route, and they don't want to keep Sainz waiting, thinking there might be a potential Mercedes offer. So they've just told him, look, we're not going to sign you. Choose your other options. We want to focus on Kimi. And Wolff wouldn't go as far to say that they're for sure signing Antonelli, but, this is as good as confirmed now, isn't it? They've said no to Sainz. Who else are they getting, right? It's obvious what they want to do. I think Toto as well said they want to reinvent themselves as a team to some degree. They feel like Antonelli is the step towards the future, and fair enough. I am probably in the minority, but I think this is a good idea and it's going to work out well in the longer term. Time will tell if they do this, of course, but they said, look, want to focus on the young drivers. That's what we told Carlos. He can go and choose where he wants to go. And honestly, I think he's probably going to go and sign the Williams deal. That would be my guess. And as I say, the Spanish Grand Prix, the next race is more than likely when that is going to be confirmed, I would presume. Let's talk, though, about practice, because the two practice sessions on the Friday basically told us nothing. But in FP3, it became relatively clear the Mercedes was, at least at this point of the weekends, the fastest car on the day and the favourites for pole position come qualifying. Now, we've seen Mercedes, even already this season, and even last season this was sometimes true, good in Q1, or good in FP1, sorry, good in FP2, sometimes a bit weaker in FP3, maybe show up well in Q1, Q2, and then fall off. We've seen this a couple of times now when When the track really ramps up and the tyres and the teams and the cars and the drivers are absolutely on their limit, the Mercedes doesn't quite seem to have the performance in it. But during practice, it became quite clear when Hamilton put 7 tenths on the field with a 1:12.5, which actually wasn't too dissimilar to what he did in the final run in qualifying, and we'll get into why that might be true in the coming minutes. This was Verstappen, by the way, on his flying lap there in the final part of free practice, hitting the wall, so no one really binned it at the wall of champions, although Zhou Guanyu brought out another red flag, and he's been having a few stinkers lately, it's got to be said. But it went Hamilton, Verstappen, Russell after practice, and all of a sudden it's like, well, hang on a second, where are Ferrari, where precisely are McLaren in this fight? Because look, I talked about it during the week, and I know that when I mentioned these Mercedes upgrades, understandably, people in the comments, and even myself, I was like, we're talking about Mercedes upgrades again for this Canadian Grand Prix, and does anyone really believe they're going to do anything? But I kind of did this time, just because it was quite clear that even, yes, Imola, they were a long way off the pace. They were like half a second off the pace, 4 or 5 tenths off the pace. But the car was at least consistent and stable, and the drivers are relatively happy with it. Monaco, they were much closer to pole in Monaco than we might have expected. So there was no doubt in my mind coming into Canada that Mercedes have definitely made progress, and they had more upgrades to bring, and they had the new front wing on Hamilton's car as well. So there were a few reasons to believe that if the other teams somewhat dropped the ball a little bit, then Mercedes would be there to pounce. And that is what we saw today. Ferrari dropped the ball, Perez drops the ball, and all of a sudden Mercedes are in the fight for pole position. And Charles Leclerc, obviously from Ferrari, was extremely confused as to why they were so slow. As Brian Bozzi, as range engineer, said, yeah, Hamilton's quite faster than everyone, but yes, I agree, we are extremely slow. And Ferrari really struggled today to get the tyres in the right window. We're going to talk about the strategy drama in a second here, because that was a whole point in qualifying. But nonetheless, that's the issue with the Ferrari. It's the same thing that Red Bull had a little bit last year when their car is so good over race distance, the RB19 for example, but in tyre warm-up, in qualifying, they struggle somewhat because of their suspension setup, and that's why Max wasn't, as dominant in qualifying last year as he was in race conditions. This year, the Ferrari doesn't put much energy through its tyres, which is great over a race distance. The pit stop strategy that Leclerc did a few races ago was something that nobody else could have done on the one stop. The Ferrari treats its tyres like no other car on the grid. But in these kind of like damp, slippery-ish conditions when you really need the tyres up to temperature in qualifying, the Ferrari still seems to have issues getting that quite to happen. Red Bull, by the way, they still had their concerns because, well, it was reported yesterday during, I think we talked about it earlier today, during FP1 and FP2, Max released FP1, Max ran brand new engine parts. Helmut Marko then told the media that in FP2, they'd had the older units in, so the damage, the ERS failure that Max had, which is believed, I think, to be an MGUK failure, did not affect the rest of the engine. But actually, it turned out, no, that was the new engine in the car. Apparently, that's what Red Bull have said. So that's not going to affect this weekend's. But just in the longer term, if those parts that fails with the new engine in the car are seriously problematic, that could mean penalties for Max further down the line. Helmut Marko even said to AMUS after that practice session that, yeah, Red Bull was running at maximum power and was still 3 tenths behind Mercedes. So, basically they were like, look, it wasn't just Merc were running their engines for glory runs. Like, this was legit pace going into qualifying. Unfortunately, we didn't get that much data on long runs because people were really just doing quali sims because they hadn't really got any runs in those type of conditions. Qualifying today was expected to be dry-ish. Tomorrow it is likely to rain at some point. We thought that it was going to rain today, to be honest, during qualifying, but it never quite happened. And in some sense, I'm glad that it didn't, just because if it had have rained towards the end of Q3, it's just like, well, the first lap matters, right? Wet qualifyings are the best when it's wet and then it's drying. And you have the whole, is it going to go to soft? Is it still going to be inters? What's the fastest thing? Wet qualifyings can actually be quite dull when it just starts raining and then everyone sits in the garage because they can't improve. So I'm kind of happy that it ended as it did, actually. If you want it to rain, you want it to rain in Q1 and slowly dry up over the session. That's kind of how I would prefer it. And we've seen that a few times in recent memory. Max did do a long run simulation and it wasn't bad, but we don't really have anything to compare this to because nobody else really did much meaningful running. This was, though, going into qualifying, all of these red marks here were effectively what were expected to be the rain coming into the track, but it never really materialized. There was this as well when Piastri, I think, was quite clearly impeded by Tsunoda, maybe impeded by Hamilton, but I don't really buy that one. I think definitely by Yuki there is a case to be made here, so I'm pretty sure they're going to investigate that. Not sure it's gone anywhere as of recording. But as qualifying truly kicks into gear, it started to become clear that, okay, the Mercedes are legit, they've got pace, and Perez is not legit. I just look, I can't say this enough times that I don't know why they re-signed Perez. Well, I do know. It's because effectively he is just now a pay driver, isn't he? Because of all the money he brings in for merch sales and stuff. But I just couldn't believe it when they actually confirmed this for 2 years. And it was confirmed today, by the way. I saw this, I think, confirmed by Helmut Marko. It's not a 1+1. This is a straight up 2-year extension. There is no 1 year deal and then 1 year, team option. This is a straight 2-year deal. I couldn't believe it. I'm not going to lie, Verstappen carries this team so hard right now. Obviously, their car is still mega, with respect to the average car. But if they didn't have Max, if they had an average driver and not Max, they would be in a tricky spot right now. So Perez, it's funny, right? When I watch qualifying now, Q1s, I'm looking for Perez. I'm thinking, all right, where is this guy? What are his lap times looking like? Because he went P12 here, and he was half a tenth on Ricciardo, who was P16. So I was like, hang on, that ain't going to be good enough. That's a 13.3 with the track improvement. He was barely up on Ricciardo and, the guys down here, even with track improvements at that point in the session. And I'm like, there's just no way that's going to be enough because Verstappen's going to overtake him. Some of these other guys are going to overtake him. And that's exactly what we went on to see. And Perez goes out in P16, knocked out by Gasly, Ricciardo, Sargent ends up P9, Albon stuck at P4, Verstappen went P1. And the real talking point here really was the fact that Yuki Tsunoda was P2, right? The man that arguably could have been, maybe should have been in that Red Bull, was in second place in this qualifying session, and Perez was out in P16. We've seen it before. We're going to see it again. These are his last 3 qualifying results. And, we talked about this the other time. The fact that his form has regressed. He gets in his own head about it somewhat. He gets the contract extension. You think maybe that'll calm him down. He'll be flying again. But no, P11, P17, P16. His last few qualifying appearances. And as we see here, Tsunoda now has more Q3 appearances than Perez has this season. So not pretty, to say the very least, for Sergio Perez. But I feel like we're almost beating a dead horse at this point. The big drama, I think, was about Ferrari. Because they'd won Monaco. They came into this weekend knowing that Red Bull probably weren't going to be emphatically the fastest. This was a great opportunity for Ferrari and for McLaren. This is Ollie Behrman seeing both Ferraris out in Q2 and thinking, what the hell has just happened here? So Russell was P1, Hamilton was P2, both with times, by the way, that would have been good enough for pole position, and we'll get back to that in a second in terms of why the final runs just weren't quite as fast. But both Ferraris out here. Now, it seemed to me that they were pretty good in the wet conditions, right? In the wet conditions earlier in the weekend in practice, they were looking pretty good. And honestly, if it rains tomorrow, who knows what kind of setup they've gone for. But Leclerc was quite clear after the fact on the radio that they just didn't have the grip here on these in the dry conditions. The Ferraris as well, by the way, this seems to be a classic Ferrari strategy. They wanted to save tyres for Q3. It was the belief of many that it was going to rain in Q3, and therefore who cares because it's going to be Inters. But actually it wasn't, and the saving the set to tyres may have proved valuable in hindsight. But the fact that they did these laps on used tyres basically cost both Ferraris the spot into Q3. In the grand scheme of things, it may not have made that much difference. They were probably just straight up too slow. But both out in Q2 on a weekend where the championship was meant to still be alive. Verstappen's P2 on the grid, Leclerc is the closest man to her in the championship, right? This was the time where Leclerc was meant to come through, Ferrari meant to come through and, put the boot on the throat, as it were, and actually keep compounding the advantage they've seen to gain over the last couple of races. But Ferrari squandered the chance. We've screwed it. I won't comment here. He says, actually, his PR person told him before the interview, hey, basically told him what to say. And Charles said, I'll say what the hell I want, and took the mic. And then, look, he's well PR trains Leclerc, but he just said, look, we weren't fast. What's more, we didn't manage the situation well. I hit traffic with a McLaren. So Leclerc's kind of saying, look, for all the progress you've made as a team, some of these old issues, strategy-wise, operations-wise, are creeping into effect, but also the car just weren't good enough, you know? Like, there were some 2020 flashbacks here. Mercedes are P1, P2, Ferrari were P11, P12. So it was fascinating to witness unfolds, but this is what happened in Q3. And this is the first time since, what, the famous 1997 European Grand Prix where Jacques Villeneuve was on pole, with Michael Schumacher and I believe Frentzen sharing pole in effect with the same time, like a, whatever it is, a 121, 072 or something. It's a famous number in motorsports anyway, just because they were all on the same time, and Jacques Villeneuve got pole because he set the time first and all this stuff. And the same thing happened today. It's the first time in basically, you know, what is it, 25 years, more than 25 years now, that this has happened, that a pole position has been given out by 0.000 seconds. But Russell did the lap time first, and it became quite clear that I think the winds picked up, the tailwind conditions. I'm not exactly sure what corners, but there was clearly changes in the conditions in the final run in qualifying that meant that basically nobody improved. There was only a couple of guys that did. Ricciardo put in a storming performance, as did Max Verstappen here, to even get it close. I mean, he was right on the money. Russell couldn't improve on his final run. And again, the advantage that Mercedes has, even if they have one, it does just disappear in the final parts of qualifying. Like, it's happened again, but their advantage going into the final part of qualifying was enough that it was still enough. So Russell pole for the second time in his career after Hungary 2022. He was also on pole for the Grand Prix in Sao Paulo 2022, but of course he wasn't on pole position because Kevin Magnussen had pole after qualifying, and then he won the sprint, so then he started first, but he didn't get pole. You guys know how it goes. Sprint race cheese is what I'm going to call it. But this is his second pole position now, and I mean, like, you're not going to see this every day. 4 drivers separated by a tenth. Norris was 2/100ths off the pace and was third. All of these drivers, though, will be pretty satisfied with this. Russell's got pole. Verstappen will feel like in race conditions he can absolutely fight from there. Mercedes believe they can win the race. Both McLarens are in a great position to attack together. And Daniel Ricciardo, P5 in the end. Less than 2/10 off the pole time. So he put in a mega lap towards the end. Alonso was P6. Hamilton, with his first run, was only ended up P7, which would be bitterly disappointing for him again, because when your teammate takes pole and you're only 7th, that's very interesting, right? And there's clearly something going on there with Hamilton behind the scenes. We heard him talk about it before when he was like, look, I don't expect to out-qualify Russell this season. There's something happening here. Tsunoda, Stroll, Albon rounds out your top 10. And even Lewis mentioned this after qualifying and said, look, I don't understand. I already know automatically that I'm going to lose 2/10 going into qualifying. It's frustrating. So, you can look at this one of two ways. Either there's some sort of sabotage going on, which he seemed to imply last time out, that favours Russell in some way, which seems doubtful, but I don't know. I mean, Hamilton knows more than we do. Or it's kind of like he's getting in his own head, maybe. I don't know. What do you guys think in the comments below? Because if he believes that he's going to lose 2/10 going into qualifying over Russell, then, you're going to make it a reality, right? That's how the mind and body often works. So, fascinating to see, but nonetheless for Mercedes, what a result. And they would have preferred Hamilton to be right up there, and the fact that his first run wasn't great and his second run was kind of compromised by the changing track conditions and just couldn't find the grip that he wanted. Hamilton even went on to say that, the car was feeling great, he gets to qualifying and the grip disappears. In FP3 I had plenty of pace, I get to qualifying, the tyres weren't working, and then goes on to say that there's nothing changed on the car. So, yeah, I don't know. I'll leave it to you guys to figure out what is going on at the moment at Mercedes. But the reality is the car's getting better and there will be more opportunities to capitalise. But this may have been the opportunity to capitalise and win a race. And George Russell effectively goes in tomorrow as the favourite for victory, given that Mercedes have seemed the fastest. Then again, though, it's probably going to rain, and that is going to make anything possible, hopefully, tomorrow, because qualifying was great. With any luck, tomorrow's race, bit of chaos, some pit stops, some inters, some medium tyres, whatever. Throw it all in there, and hopefully we're going to get an absolute banger. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Russell actually popped this pose after securing pole position. I wonder if he'd planned this, or if it just kind of came naturally to him. But hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.